Today on Let It Rip Weekend, should Michigan be the next state to legalize recreational marijuana?
I mean, it's weed. Like, it's nothing wrong with weed. Like, it's okay.
I think we should say no to drugs. Because honestly, that's what it is. It's drugs.
A ballot initiative has been approved, and if legislators don't legalize it first, you'll be deciding on the November ballot. Now, groups on both sides are mobilizing for your vote. So is it high time that pot is legal, or should we hit the brakes? Let It Rip Weekend starts right now. All right, it's time for Let It Rip Weekend. I'm Marielle Liu.
And I'm Charlie Langton. All right, joining us today, attorney Barton Morris. He is from the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol. He says it is time to end marijuana prohibition. His group is one of the groups that submitted the ballot initiative to regulate marijuana. Next to him, though, Scott Greenlee. He's from the Healthy and Productive Michigan. His group is working in direct opposition to Barton. Next, Deborah Young joins us. She is a board member of MI Legalize, and she's also a cannabis patient. And not last but not least, Scott Macy is here. He's from the Brighton Center for Recovery. He says pot is a gateway drug. Legalizing it would cause more harm to the community than good. Thank you, panel, for being on Let It Rip. Barton, let me start with you, though. I know it's on the ballot. I know it's going to be in Michigan, but there's still a federal issue that can't be ignored. If this becomes legal, say, in Michigan, what's to prevent the feds from busting anybody who has a joint?
The federal government is allowed to enact laws that affect the country as a whole, right? But Michigan has the right to enact laws that affect only Michigan. It's a states' right issue that recently Donald Trump has endorsed and acknowledged as well. We have a 10th Amendment right to enact laws that affect only our state, and we're doing just that with the regulation.
Are you saying there's no risk by being busted by the feds if this becomes legal?
There's risk for those that are importing it out of the state, or they're doing so in violation of federal law. But state law says, if this passes, is that those that are complying with the act, individuals that are over the age of 21, they're able to utilize and purchase marijuana. That's not going to be a problem with the federal government, and we see that the federal policy is changing in this regard, like, very rapidly.
Perhaps that's not so, though. We hear Attorney General Jeff Sessions very recently saying that he intends to crack down.
Yeah, January 3rd, you know, Sessions rolled back the Cole memo, which essentially was allowing the federal government and states within it, whether it's a states' rights issue as defined by the federal government or not, to start picking and choosing what laws they're going to enforce. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing. We are a rule of law society. We need to take the laws as they are written and enforce them to their letter.
But the reality is, in the 9 other states that have legalization of marijuana, I don't see Jeff Sessions or the feds busting people for a joint. Isn't that true?
Right. Well, the whole busting thing is a bit of a misnomer, too, because people who have, like, a first violation for just having one bite of a brownie or a gummy or taking a puff of cigarettes, you know, or the marijuana cigarettes, that's something that people aren't getting arrested for and thrown in jail. They're getting tickets.
Many people are going to jail, and many people who don't go to jail have to pay unbelievable attorney fees and court costs and things of that to avoid jail. Also, Charlie, the president has recently, in the last few days, actually kind of indicated that perhaps he's in favor of federalization, of legalization of marijuana. And we have seen many times...
The president is in favor of it?
The president has said that he is in favor of it. We've heard that the last few days. We've seen a lot of bills introduced in Congress. Chuck Schumer has recently introduced a bill. This could blow up nationally, and that's what we're hoping.
And this is a huge problem, because we're doing a lot of things on perhaps, or this person said, or that person said. We have a Federal Controlled Substance Act. We have a federal law right now.
And
unless that's changed, we need to adhere to the law.
Right, but by 65%, the people want legalization.
And let's be careful when we say 65%, because I mean, I think a lot of the rhetoric you know, there's such a generational gap in knowledge of what this bill is and what marijuana is today, that there's a lot of education that is needed. I mean, is this this bill really the most robust way we can roll this out, or is this just the first thing and we're going to react to it right away?
Now, we spent many years of researching.
But the reality, Scott, though, is, and you're a no vote on this, but the reality is that marijuana has not injured a lot of people. Isn't that true?
And that's what's so upsetting to equate it to, because I go into schools, you talk to kids, and the risk perception is at the lowest, and we're living in the worst epidemic our society has ever seen, and it's getting worse. We're priming the adolescent brain for addiction currently through a lot. I mean, just look at what's happening with vape and how quickly that's taken off in just the last 3 years.
Well, we just did a segment with junk food. I mean, you can go to some fast foods, and it's far worse than pot. Help me out. Is that true?
I try and avoid those, that's for sure.
Or cigarettes.
You know, those aren't the questions right now. The question right now is marijuana for recreation. So we're not arguing alcohol. We're not arguing fast food. We're arguing marijuana for recreation. By the way, not medical. Medical marijuana is effective in Michigan. Apparently, it's been passed. It's been reformed. And this ballot proposal has nothing to do with the medical marijuana stuff, which is very important for people to understand.
But this train is leaving the station. State after state after state is slowly saying, yes, this is what we want. Are you fighting a losing battle?
No, we're absolutely not fighting a losing battle. And the polling, data cracks me up. We're at 60% or 65% in favor. Well, if you look at the last presidential race and the polls that were done with regard to that, they don't always turn out the way that they're done, especially depending on how the questions are asked and what types of samples you use.
I'd like to speak on that because I ran 6 legalization campaigns locally that all won, 3 of them by 70%. So this is not a poll. These are actual people who actually voted. Every single one.
In a part of the state, not in the entire state.
We ran campaigns in 20 cities around the state and won in almost all of them by very large margins. 70% is a mandate. This is not just a...
Let me ask Deborah or Barton, convince an elderly person in the city of Detroit, churchgoer, doesn't like pot and is upset every day when they're driving down the street and they smell the pot by a young person.
Okay.
Music blasting. That's not all that uncommon. I'm generalizing a little, but it's not all that uncommon.
I mean, this is what young people do. Young people play music. Young people are loud. Young people experiment. We don't advocate this for children. But when we look at the people who are arrested and the people who are in jail, it is enormously African American. It is enormously minority.
And it's going to get worse.
When I knocked on doors in Oak Park, when I ran a campaign in Oak Park to legalize, that we did pass, I spoke to many elderly people who had left the city because of drugs, because of things of this nature, and they were worried about grandchildren being arrested.
Are these the same elderly people who were smoking pot during the 70s?
Exactly. But they're worried about their kids and their grandkids being arrested for something like
the social
cannabis.
Justice one is important because in Denver, actually in the inner cities, arrests have gone up. In the suburbs, with people like me, arrests have gone down for marijuana violations.
In Michigan,
gone
the
up in the last 5 years.
Minorities are 3 times more likely to be prosecuted for
the African American and Hispanic population is being
gone up with legalization.
Through legalization.
It's going to go down. That's precisely.
No, it's totally gone up.
But is there like in Washington and Oregon and Colorado, the states that have it, is there evidence that crime has gone up?
You remove the black
Most
market.
definitely.
You remove
Most
the black market.
definitely. Most definitely. Lessons learned. We've already got this is the problem in this country. We find it hard to follow the evidence. I mean, just look at the opiate epidemic.
There evidence of crime
there's evidence of crime. There's evidence of the kids, the uses of kids. And I sat here a couple of months ago and we argued about the opiate epidemic, that it would take care of it or that it would
reduce it.
Colorado has seen the highest level amongst all drugs of abuse.
What kind of crime?
Well, I mean, all kinds of crimes.
I mean, it's like stealing cars, driving offenses.
All kinds of crimes.
And how is that attributed to legalization?
And now, well, the big one is the distribution over state lines. I mean, the Postal Service has gotten very busy.
You wouldn't believe the kind of tourists that this stuff attracts.
Yeah.
But this is why we need federal legalization. Then we don't have to worry about this.
Do you have evidence, though, that if marijuana is legal,
why not wait for the federal government to come on board then.
Crime is going up, that there'll be an increase of law enforcement. That's what we're really talking about.
Oh, yeah, there's massive law enforcement
they're ignorant to what they know and what they have to go down.
So we're 5 years in Colorado. Yeah, we got to be careful with Scott. So there's 5 years in Colorado, and there's no question that in the inner cities, marijuana arrests have gone up. And I'm talking about people of color, I'm talking about minorities. Apparently, when it's legalized, all that stuff is supposed to go away, and it doesn't. A more robust black market tends to form. People come in from other states, they buy as much of it as they can, and they
that's from the overproduction.
Look at Nebraska. Look at Nebraska and what's happening.
He's talking about other states, but in Michigan, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act is specifically states it's not going to allow the arrest of individuals for possession of marijuana and for even the sale of marijuana at certain amounts.
But is there a black
maybe Colorado laws perhaps will let that happen, but our legislation is not going to allow that to happen. And as far as like the opiate epidemic, that's significant because states has demonstrated that opiate deaths, opiate hospitalizations, prescriptions is going to go down. There's 35,000. There's 35,000 deaths in this country.
Hold that thought right now. We are not done with this subject. In fact, we're talking about the politics of pot when we come back because it's on the ballot. And believe me, these two groups here are going to spend a lot of money educating voters. We'll talk about that in a moment.
Don't forget, use the hashtag #LetItRip. You might see your comment on Facebook or Twitter. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We are here with Barton Morris, Scott Greenlee, Deborah Young, and Scott Massey. Scott, first to you. I'm reading a lot of tweets that are coming in, and it seems like most people are characterizing some of the panel as old, out of touch, not realizing what the people want. What do you say to that? Calvin here saying that cigarettes and alcohol have harmed more people than marijuana.
Yeah, so let's continue the path continue down that path. Look, there is most of the people tweeting are the younger generation. Let's understand that. And most of the people that are going to be voting on this issue are going to be some older people that don't have really a true understanding of not only what today's marijuana is. I mean, just in the last 3 years, you can look at the potency. You can look at what they are buying. They're not buying your typical marijuana leaf or flower. They're buying
it's not your father's marijuana. Yeah. It's much stronger.
Not your father's marijuana. That's a good quote.
I mean, it's much stronger. And the thing about the cigarette and the alcohol argument, that's not what we're debating. We're debating marijuana. Just because one thing went bad or one thing might be worse doesn't mean we should do something else that's bad. First-degree murder is awful. Third-degree murder is not as bad as first-degree murder, so we're not going to legalize that. We're not going to say that's great. So if they do the contention that alcohol is worse, and if they say that marijuana is not as bad, it doesn't mean it's a great idea.
We shouldn't be equating marijuana with first or third-degree murder. The fact is that the regulation and legalization of marijuana is much, much better for our society. There's going to be significant tax revenue, for instance. The state of Michigan is looking to earn at least $200 million the first year alone in tax revenue. That's going to go.
What are the costs? And what are the costs? The costs of this projection are like $500,000. Stepping on a dollar to pick up a dime.
And the lottery was going to fund schools forever when we brought that. And I've been looking at public school budgets.
Tax else not going too well.
Here's the reality of this proposal. Let's understand the proposal, though. If it passes now, roughly a third of the revenue generated from a 10% tax goes to schools, a third goes to roads, and another third roughly goes to
the first 5 years. The first 5 years, the majority goes to the regulation of it, and we don't even know what that regulation is going to be. So you're not going to see anything.
The tax touch is going to be far greater than the regulation cost.
Help me out here. If I'm a mayor of a city, and I see that I can fix my roads, and I can get a new couple of cops, and I can, by passing this, I'm going to pass it.
Of course. Here's what I'll tell you. Everything is projected. We don't know exactly what it is. Of course, numbers are bumped to fit whatever narrative you're trying to pitch the public in this situation. And shame on us. You know, we had the lottery years and years ago, and it was going to fund schools forever, and it doesn't. Now we're told, oh, a bunch of money is going to go to roads, a bunch of money is going to go to municipalities. Who knows how much much the money's going to be, and also from a long-term standpoint, who knows the unintended cost, additional law enforcement costs, additional health costs, additional rehab costs. And interestingly, there's no money set aside for rehab or for any type of medical costs.
You're wrong about
you're totally
the
wrong
lottery.
about that.
The lottery has the last 3 years funded more money into our school system.
And then they remove it dollar for dollar.
Just to give you an example.
What I know about the lottery is I was told we'd never have to worry about school funding again, and guess what? We got problems with school funding.
We want to put an end to the policing for profit that goes on in this state, where the police departments are taking people's assets for cannabis-related things. They have not even been convicted of these crimes. And I also want to speak to the elder thing, because I'm the oldest person on this panel. I'm a grandmother in my 60s. Okay, so let's not discount the older people, because the older people are very much in favor of this. We're using this for ailments. We're using this for arthritis.
Wait. Don't go to medical marijuana. Don't blur the lines. We're talking about recreational marijuana.
We're also using it recreationally.
Yeah, no, that's what we're here for, recreational. Don't blur the lines to the voting public.
Okay, I used your father's cannabis.
That's the problem.
I was your father. I've used the cannabis.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I was born in the 50s. Okay,
I love my weed when I smoked it, but it's nothing compared to what it is today.
Okay, let me finish. I'm still standing. I have no ill effects. I use it medicinally. I use it recreationally. And many older people do, and people are very educated. We are the generation that...
Let's be careful. I mean, I work in a treatment setting where... I work in a treatment setting where the people that come in for treatment, there are 3 out of 7, okay, that become addicted.
I mean, you know, but the thing is, not become addicted.
What about those people, right? You know, they're not
addicted to alcohol anyway.
Yeah, but from a standpoint, I mean, what we have to understand that, look, we're living in the worst epidemic that we ever have lived in before. We have life expectancy going down. We have mortality rates that are increasing. Just 174 people a day from drug overdose. And I equate it because that's the most regulated industry in the world is pharmaceuticals. And we're living in an epidemic within the regulated. And you're going to tell me you're going to regulate marijuana?
Let's talk about
It's absolutely
the reality, though, that if this does pass and there's potentially $100 to $200 million of business, I think the 2 Scots here who are voting no are going to be outspent tremendously by the groups that want this on the ballot.
Yeah, let me address that.
On fighting your cause.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if this was going to be so good for business and so good for tax dollars, why is the Michigan Chamber out against it? Why is the Grand Rapids Chamber? Why are other chambers lining up against it? It's because there's a narrow segment of our society that's got the wealth to invest in a market like this and make money. And guys, they are going to
profit over principles.
They are going to spend a lot of money to try and do this.
I was told there's going to be a $6 million campaign to vote yes on this. Can you raise $6 million to counter this?
We sure hope so. I mean, we're going to probably get outspent. We're not, you know, fools about that, because we're not making any money from it. Our side of this thing isn't going to be profitable. Okay,
Michigan is
their side,
profitable.
Individuals that they represent.
Our economy is going to be the benefactor of a $1.5 billion.
It's the lowest tax rate. It's the lowest excise tax rate on marijuana than any other state.
The number of jobs that we're talking about is going to significantly improve our economy. The money that we're bringing in, $1.5 billion, just in the first year alone, is a significant increase to our economy. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to be working that were otherwise working, a lot of property that wasn't otherwise being taken advantage of, and a lot of opportunity that we're missing out on right now. The state of Michigan.
Is that mirrored in the other states that have legalized marijuana?
Yes. You know, Michigan is going to be, besides California, Michigan is going to be the biggest market for medical marijuana, or for recreational marijuana. It's larger than Colorado, Oregon. It's going to be larger than any of these states besides California.
All projected, but the jobs problem is a real problem. We're under 5% unemployment, and drug testing is not going away. And in Michigan, where people have to use machinery, transportation's important, and it stays in your system for up to 30 days.
But Deb, let me ask
Huge
Deb,
issue.
It doesn't impair you for 30 days.
It does not impair you for 30 days.
No, I'm saying it stays in your system for 30 days. So if someone does it and they're drug tested randomly at their job 20 days later, sure, they might not be impaired, but guess what? They're positive, they lose their job.
The economic costs are going to be huge.
Exactly. Then you make a choice not to use marijuana.
But with a lot more of it around, a lot more people are going to use.
People will get fired for smoking too.
If my job tells me not to use marijuana, then I'm not using it.
All right, hold on.
All right, coming up, we will share your thoughts live on the air. We'll be right back. All right, so many comments rolling in. I will start here. It's hilarious to hear some of the panel lean on the what about the kids argument when the legislation suggests a minimum age of 21. Barton, take that.
That is absolutely right. We don't condone the use of marijuana by anybody under the age of 21. Same thing for alcohol. And that is something the regulatory agencies in the state are going to ensure, is that these retail operations are not going to sell to anybody that is not authorized.
More marijuana around, more marijuana available.
All right, let me try one here. Matthew writes, the only way marijuana can kill you is if a ton of it falls on you. Yeah. Legalize it. Scots, what about that? Are they really
it's just that argument just really, just goes to the ignorance of this issue and the aspect of the gateway proposition and the progression of the disease of addiction. It's just, that's the message that we're sending our kids, and the risk perception is at the lowest amongst the worst time in this society when it comes to drugs and abuse.
And it's definitely a gateway drug.
Nancy, can you take this one? I'm watching Let It Rip, and this recovering junkie says marijuana is a gateway drug.
No question.
Is.
Okay.
What's interesting is they say marijuana is not a gateway drug because they know people who have done marijuana and not done harder drugs. I don't know anybody on cocaine who hasn't tried marijuana.
Well, this person says that I used to smoke weed and I never thought about doing any other drugs. Nancy, can you take that?
Deborah,
there's always one.
That is true. The majority of cannabis users have never gone on. The #1 gateway drug apparently is alcohol. Number 2 is tobacco, not marijuana.
Let me take one over. Let me take one over here.
Those are both legal.
Cindy writes here that it will not, meaning marijuana, the funding will not be used for schools, roads, etc. They're just blowing smoke. Barton, address that.
The law is very specific that that money has to go there, right? And so I don't understand why anybody would even think that. That's a
the law is very specific that marijuana is illegal in the United States too, and yet we're trying to get around that.
Okay, how about this one from Twitter? Cannabis ended a 20-year opioid addiction for me. Clean from opiates for over 8 years. Thanks to cannabis.
Yes, I know many people.
That's the medical marijuana aspect. We're talking about legalization of recreational use.
Recreational marijuana,
there is medical.
Reduces mortality rates for opiate. That is very much a recreational marijuana issue.
That it helped him with his alcohol.
It does. It very much does.
Very much.
Journal of American
Last question here, real quick. Michael Ward on Facebook. Why not just decriminalize? Why should it be regulated at all? It's a plant.
Right. Very good point.
It should be regulated. It's a drug, okay? Just like alcohol, that's what we talk about. Coalition to regulate marijuana.
It absolutely is a drug.
All right, we have to leave it right there. Thank you so much.
I haven't come across anybody